we sing of sparkling seas, of prairies, valleys, mountains, and stately forest trees. We sing of flashing sunshine and life bestowing rain, of birds among the branches and springtime come again. We sing the heart courageous, the youthful eager mind. We sing of hopes undaunted, of friendly ways and kind. We sing the roses waiting beneath the deep piled snows. We sing the earth's great splendor, whose beauty round us grows.
Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spokane, where we join together to create a nourishing, liberal religious home and to champion justice, diversity, and environmental stewardship in our wider world, or as we say in short, to create community, find meaning, and work for justice. Welcome to each and every one of you. We want to begin, as always, by embracing all that you bring with you to this space, all of your unique beliefs, your background, your lifestyle, your experiences, all that helps make you who you are is welcome here today. So welcome to one and all, whether you are joining us in the room as a regular attendee or perhaps joining us for the first time or visiting with us. It's great to see some familiar faces I've not seen for a while with us. So welcome to one and all. Welcome to those of you who are live streaming with us as well. It's always great to have you as part of our service. So thanks to all for being here. And I don't have any announcements to make this morning. Why don't we take a few extra moments to greet one another before we really get into the service. So make some new friends today and say hello to those you know and love. doing? I don't recognize you. You're so big. He's being shy. That's all right. Everybody's a little shy now and then. Even me, believe it or not. Well, we are going to move forward with our service now by lighting our chalice, the symbol of our unity and our solidarity, of our openness and our inclusion, of our community and our individual uniqueness. May this small flame be our offering of warmth to those who are cold and alone, and a light to those in darkness. May it be a flame that ignites justice in our world, and a beacon of hope to those in need, and may it reflect at least a spark of truth wherever truth has been lost, and cast a healthy shadow of doubt wherever it's been found.
The opening reflection comes from Robert Fulghum, Presbyterian minister, and perhaps best known as author of All I Really Needed to Know Is What I Learned in Kindergarten. Every person passing through this life will unknowingly leave something and take something away. Most of this something cannot be seen or heard or numbered or scientifically detected or counted. It is what we leave in the minds of other people and what they leave in ours. Memory. The census doesn't count. Nothing counts without it.
Please rise as you're willing and able. This is a song about the things that make us moan. So you can get into your moans from the gut. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child, a long way from home, a long way from home. Sometimes I feel like I have no friend. Sometimes I feel like I have no friend. Sometimes I feel like I have no friend. A long way from home. A long way from home. Sometimes I feel like I'm almost gone. Sometimes I feel like I'm almost gone. Sometimes I feel like I'm almost gone. A long way from home. A long way from home.
We're now going to kindle our candles of care for those who are most on our hearts and minds this morning. And I did not have any special requests, but want to begin as we have on behalf of the people of Ukraine who are being most, and the people of that region of the world who are being most impacted by the violence there. And I know there's a lot of other problems in the world I could address on Sunday morning, problems in the country, the heat being one of them. A lot of people suffering lots of things. So we will take a moment of silence on behalf of those that you might be thinking of, and as always, you're welcome to name them aloud at this time if you'd like. those named aloud and those embraced in our silence, and all those who are suffering in our world at this hour, we hold in our community with compassion. This month's special collection is on behalf of Shalom Ministries. If you've not heard of Shalom Ministries, you probably have, because it's been around a long time. They've been serving meals to the needy in Spokane since the 1970s. Served over 5,000 meals last month alone, reaching many of Spokane's homeless and poor. And it also works on behalf of some of its members to provide them laundry services and shower privileges, bus passes, skill training, stipends, and pathways to permanent housing. And it continues to provide blankets and warm coats and sleeping bags to those living on the streets in the colder parts of the year. So a real institution in our community that's making a big difference, and it's making a difference largely on behalf of organizations like ours and others that contribute to this worthy cause. So if this is a ministry that speaks to you and you'd like to contribute to it today, please use the special collection envelope in your order of service. If you're streaming and want to go online and make a contribution, just be sure and designate that it's for our special collection, or even send a check and put something like that in the memo line. And we greatly appreciate your generosity, and certainly appreciate the good things that Shalom Ministries is doing in our community. So we now gratefully give and receive this morning's offering, which helps sustain this community and our mission to the larger world.
At this point, I'd love to invite any children up for our time for all ages. And thank you for singing that song. That's been my favorite movie since I was about 3 years old. Come on down, kids. I marked every birthday with one of the Von Trapp children. I was like, oh, no, I'm as old as Liesel. Now I'm as old as Gretel. And now I'm way older than Maria. It's kind of fun. Good morning, everyone. So this is a story adapted from a story written by Christopher Buisse. And unlike Christopher Buisse, my son Max and I were at Camp Dartlow last week. It's a lovely little day camp out on the Little Spokane River. And one of the activities that they offer to the kids is sluicing. Max, do you want to come up and explain what sluicing is? You trust me to explain it? Okay, let me know if I get it right. So sluicing is taking some dirt, putting it in a little sieve, and then running your creek water over it to see what you end up with, yeah? Okay, I got it. And a liberal religious education is a little bit like sluicing or mining for gems. We try to teach our children discernment. And the word discernment comes from a Latin word called discernere, which means to separate, to distinguish, or to sort out. In other words, we try to teach our children, all of you, how to be gem miners. Mining for ideas requires the ability to make decisions about what is worth keeping and what should be sifted out and discarded. And this can be really hard because whether we're aware of it or not, we are learning things all the time from videos, books, magazines, friends, lots of other sources. Can you think of anything else that you learned from? I covered it all? Okay. School, of course, school. Maybe not in the summer, but September through June, you're learning at school. And parents and caregivers, we know that we can't shelter our children forever, but we can teach them this process of discernment and the art of mining for ideas that are true gems. We can help to awaken their conscience so that they will be able to make responsible choices and to separate things of value from things that have no value. So kids, I'm wondering, do you have what it takes to mine for ideas?
Yes.
Let's try that again. Do you have what it takes to be an ideas miner?
Yes.
I think you do. I think we all do. And now join me in singing our children out to Play Club.
Go now in peace, go now in peace. May the spirit of love surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go.
Separated. This is the time in our service to shift our focus. Get comfortable. Breathe slowly and consider these words of Robert Fulghum. It doesn't matter what you say you believe, it only matters what you do.
For our reading today, I'm going to invite you to read with me number 658. Number 658 in the back of your gray hymnal. Okay, and I think there are enough of us in the room today to maybe divide. We'll have this half of the room can read with me, okay? And this half of the room will be our respondents and read with Madeline, okay? Now, Madeline has a much better voice than I do, so you guys have to jump right on it, okay? Otherwise, they're going to make us look bad. Okay, ready? 658. To laugh is to risk appearing the fool.
To weep is to risk appearing sentimental.
To reach out for another is to risk exposing oneself.
To place our ideas, our dreams before the crowd is to risk loss.
To love is to risk not being loved in return.
To hope is to risk despair.
To try is to risk failure.
To live is to risk dying.
Thank you. Last month, some of you may recall, I gave a sermon about the challenges of democracy and the many disagreements the Enlightenment thinkers who fashioned our Western democracies had about it. Some of them believed that it would be best to have a benevolent monarch rule in the interest of human welfare with no checks and balances. Others believed a monarch's authority should be tempered, even overridden, by a parliamentary elites and nobles who had the stature and wisdom to do so. And others believed in a representative democracy in which a government's leaders are chosen by those over whom they govern. But nobody argued for a pure democracy in which everything, all of a country's laws or policies or economic decisions and so forth, are decided exclusively by the masses. And this is so because none of these thinkers considered the masses smart enough as a whole to make sound decisions. Who knows? They might even elect an unqualified populace to run things. And nobody wants to end up with an incompetent nincompoop in power. As I mentioned then, Plato believed this the very outcome inevitable, and therefore considered democracy little better than tyranny. How grandly democracy sets her foot upon all fine theories of education, he said, yet how little she cares for the training of her statesmen. The only qualification which she demands is the profession of patriotism. Such is democracy. A pleasing, lawless, various sort of government distributing equality to equals and unequals alike. Now, Plato would probably have been canceled for saying something like that today, because he's openly acknowledging that not everyone is equally as intelligent, and that those who govern us ought to be among the most intelligent and well-educated a society has to offer. And I understand this point, and I agree that electing popular figures to lead us just because of their celebrity can be a troubling consequence of democracy, as happens all too often. Ronald Reagan, Jesse Ventura, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Jerry Springer, and of course, Donald Trump are but a few of those who have been elected to high positions because of their celebrity. And it has been frequently my experience that even on a local level, area television personalities like former reporters and news anchors handily win elections over more experienced politicians or candidates. Today, populism is compounded by an increasing inability for any of us to adequately distinguish fact from fiction, which is making a lot of voters uninformed or ill-informed. We live in an age of information overload, if not information chaos. There's so much information on the internet and social media, much of which is misinformation or intentional disinformation, that it's becoming impossible to know what is and isn't true. Additionally, we are well into an age of unreason, resulting from those counter-Enlightenment thinkers who 200 years ago began rejecting reason, truth, and knowledge. And they glorified feelings over substance, subjectivity over objectivity, and group beliefs over individual freedom. So in addition to not knowing who or what to believe, there are many postmodernists today who don't believe in truth or objective reality and therefore accept that one person's or group's ideas are just as valid as another's, that all beliefs are equal. Now, with artificial intelligence and its deep fakes on the scene, there may be even greater reason for us not to trust what we see with our own eyes. Despite all of this, as a liberal whose values remain rooted in the Enlightenment principles, I still believe that our representative form of government, our representative form of democracy in which every citizen has a voice in choosing their leaders, is the best form of government there is. Liberalism demands that people have a voice in how and by whom they are governed. It is for us a moral imperative. So the solution to poorly educated and ill-informed voters is not to eliminate voting, but to provide adequate education and reliable information. The solution is not eliminating democracy, but making it better. This brings us back to Plato's point about having properly educated citizens running our governments. That only an elite few were properly educated back then meant that only a few were qualified to rule. But again, the other solution is to properly educate everyone, which is why Horace Mann, a Unitarian, helped establish publicly funded education in 1837, only 50 years after the U.S. Constitution had been signed. But it was only 2 years after its signing that Thomas Jefferson famously said, "Wherever the people are well informed, they can be trusted with their own government." Now, this statement was made in a longer letter in response to Reverend Richard Price, a moral philosopher, Enlightenment reformer, and a Unitarian minister in London, who had written to Jefferson about the successful adoption of the Constitution, which some historians believe Price may have helped fashion. Jefferson's entire sentence says, "Wherever the people are well informed, they can be trusted with their own government. That, whenever things get so far wrong as to attract their notice, they may be relied on to set them to rights." He was talking about the 13 colonies, having signed the Constitution, initially only 11, because they had become awakened, in his terms, from the sleep of despotism in which they were sunk. Setting things to rights in this context meant overthrowing despotic governments. Signing the Constitution was only the final and most peaceful act in what had been a violent revolution against tyranny. So Jefferson wasn't referring to public education when he made his statement about a well-informed citizenship. But it makes sense that there is no better way to become well-informed than through a proper education. Or does it? Educators and education systems can also come in the form of indoctrination that benefits the ruling elite and the status quo. There's no guarantee that education will bring out the best in people and not instead be conducted in the interest of the very despots that democracies are meant to thwart. Remember the so-called re-education centers run by the Communist Party in Vietnam, which was really a prison for hundreds of thousands of soldiers and military officials who had served South Vietnam during the war. The same goes on in China today, and Russia is currently re-educating thousands of Ukrainians captured in the war, including some children they've removed from their homes. And even in democratic nations like ours, who decides what should be taught to our children and why? I recently watched a panel discussion on artificial intelligence during which a young boy, amongst a sea of entrepreneurs, I'm guessing about 12 years old, got up and asked the following question. "I'm a kid," he said, because we needed to know that. "So I still go to school. And in school, a lot of kids have been cheating or quote cheating, and they've been using ChatGPT to write essays, to do book reviews, to do their math. And I guess my question is, one, how do you think schools should evolve to deal with that? Or do you think it's really cheating if it's a tool that we're going to be able to use later on?" That's a brilliant kid. One of the panelists, Andrew Ng, a Stanford University professor and founder of 2 AI companies, responded that transparency is the key. That are the students being honest about using AI and following the class rules about doing so? Pretty good response if there were any class rules about doing so, but if the class rules are you can't use it, they're probably not going to be honest, are there? Not much motivation. But another panelist, Imad Mostaki, founder of Stability AI, said something a bit more provocative that really caught my attention. He said, "Cheating implies it's a contest. Schools should not be a contest. I think most schools are basically childcare systems based on status games. I think schools should embrace this technology, and they should really think, how can we impart knowledge into individuals? How can we impart critical systems? Because again, you will never not be without this AI as you grow up, and you have to prepare for that." Being married to a dedicated school teacher and knowing others like her, I'm not so sure I agree with classifying teachers as child care workers. But I do agree that AI is here to stay and that kids need to learn how to use it productively and responsibly, and they need to do so immediately because it's about to change everything, far more than any technology or anything else. I dare say even fire has changed the human condition. But the phrase Ahmad used that bothers me is his question. How can we impart knowledge into individuals? For I do not believe that children are depositories that society has a moral right to impart knowledge into. Surely we need to teach them what they need to know to survive and thrive in today's increasingly complex world, just as surely as we need to teach them how to safely cross the street when they're young and later to safely drive down those streets. And learning how to properly use AI tools will become more important than learning to use computers in today's world, or maybe I should say yesterday's world. But at its core, education isn't about putting knowledge into kids. It's about leading them to discover knowledge for themselves. It's not about teaching them what to think, it's about teaching them how to think. And that's what the word educate means, from the Latin term meaning to draw out or to bring forth, to lead out. It's about teaching kids to discover and use their own faculties and their own agency, so they'll grow up into the kind of people we need them to be. People who are fully functional in our society, fully capable of thinking and making decisions. A lesser-known Franco-German Enlightenment philosopher, Baron de Holbach, born in 1723, was the first to propose free public education. By the way, for both girls and boys. 1723. I love those Enlightenment thinkers. Holbach was a royalist, meaning he believed the government should be run by a sovereign but benevolent monarch. He believed that if a king must be loved, then he must deserve to be loved, and that it was up to the state to make sure he received the kind of education that would make him wise and caring and deserving of his people's affections. Holbach also thought that it was the state's job to educate its citizens to love their king, saying the happiest state is that which contains the greatest number of enlightened people. Now here's how historian Maurice Cranston summarizes Holbach's idea of what education should look like. The aim of education should be the improvement of morals at the same time as the enlargement of knowledge. The teaching of history, for example, should be designed to show pupils how virtue has contributed in the past to the glory and prosperity of nations and how vice has brought about their decay. The teaching of sciences should be directed to awakening the pupil's awareness of the usefulness of science as distinct from the purely academic content. There should be no wasting of time on dead languages, but there should be daily teaching of a moral catechism and moral code so as to prepare children for a life of virtue. Moreover, this education should be provided for girls as well as boys, for women can acquire a patriotism, a greatness of soul and wisdom of which men themselves are incapable in corrupt and enslaved nations. Now, using public education to teach people to love their king may sound a little Orwellian, but Holbach likely considered it no more so than beginning each day of school with a Pledge of Allegiance, as we do in the United States, in its public schools. Still, as enlightened as his vision of public education was, we still must wonder who decides what moral catechism and what moral code will be used to prepare children to live a life of virtue. And what virtue? Whose virtue are we talking about? The industrial model of education, which has since been used in most democracies, in which every child is considered the same and taught the same material, is about shaping minds, not liberating them. Again, being married to a teacher, I know this has changed a lot in recent years, and we've come to realize that children have different aptitudes and different learning styles, and one style of education does not fit all. Thank goodness. But public education remains a source of controversy in our societies, as ideologues of all kinds seek to seize control of our school boards and our libraries in order to deposit and withdraw the information they see fit to shape, not free, the minds of our children. So again, who decides what goes into the depository and what remains, or what's removed? Who determines what our kids can learn and what they can't? Until we can satisfactorily address these concerns, it's fair to say that public education is not necessarily the solution to democracy's problem. Namely, how does society ensure that it has a well-informed public that can vote wisely in order to promote the common good and human well-being? How do we make that happen? We've had 186 years of public education in the U.S., and things aren't looking so good for us. Occasionally during the day, I ask my Alexa device to play the headlines. After listening to the top stories on NPR, I switch to CNN for a few minutes, as long as I can stomach it. I actually told my Alexa the other day, Alexa, please make a note. She says, go ahead. CNN is full of beep. So I ask her now, Alexa, please play my note, and she reminds me of my feelings. Anyway, NPR, CNN, both of which are currently seem more concerned about an actors' strike in Hollywood than the fact that the earth is hotter than hell almost everywhere on the planet, including oceans that are warming up to record-breaking temperatures. At least the heat did make it to the front page of the New York Times yesterday, right after stories about expensive medical bills for amputees, 2 stories about a serial killer, Republican candidates running for office, the fault in a failed submarine design, a Canadian politician threatened by China, and the Hollywood actors' strike. What's happening to our planet right now ought to be a far more greater concern than all of these other matters, and should be treated as seriously as if there were a meteor racing towards our planet so large that it might wipe us out. But we are collectively too dumb to take it seriously. Collectively, not necessarily as individuals. Our democracy itself is so divided and dysfunctional that our government can hardly accomplish anything that meaningfully addresses any of our biggest problems and concerns. Meanwhile, our uninformed public succumbs to irrational conspiracy theories and unsubstantiated social media claims while segregating into identity groups and echo chambers that despise outsiders. They are not the well-informed, well-educated public that we desperately need to make rational decisions about the directions we're heading and which leaders are needed to help us get us there. We are not the well-informed, well-educated people necessary to make our democracies work. So what now? What, if anything, can we do about this? First, we need to recognize and understand that the underlying cause of what's going on is fear. Mistrust is a symptom of fear. We're on information overload, which makes it increasingly difficult to know who is telling the truth, so we're afraid to trust anything we're told. We mistrust and therefore are afraid of groups outside our own, which has led to social segregation, incivility, unrest, and political gridlock. We mistrust and therefore are afraid of science and medicine, which has led to disastrous disbelief in the climate change happening right in front of us, and to an irrational fear of life-saving vaccinations. We move toward extremism and embrace conspiracy theories because we are afraid. We go into denial because we are afraid. We attack and cancel those we disagree with because we are afraid. We are afraid that what they say might be true and what we say might be wrong. And we're afraid if we're wrong, we might end up being dead wrong. That's scary. We reject objective reality and truth because we're afraid to face and cope with reality and the truth because it might hurt. We favor emotionalism over reason because we're comforted with what feels good inside, not by what's really happening outside ourselves. And so we are not a well-informed public because too many of us are terrified of information. We're terrified of the truth. We're terrified of the realities and challenges we face. So that's the first step in helping our human family cool its heels and maybe begin to cool our planet in the process. Recognizing the root of our problem is fear, some of which is justified and much of which is not, and that even our legitimate fears must be faced, not ignored. The fear of being crushed in a submarine beneath the sea is nothing to worry about. Okay, trust me on that. Few of us will ever have to worry about having our images used in a Hollywood film without our permission. The submarine story and the Hollywood story are distractions from the real problems. Gun violence and mass shootings are happening throughout the U.S. every day. And the only thing our government seems able to accomplish is to make it harder for women to have abortions. This is where liberalism comes in, particularly Unitarianism. For ours is a religion that is meant to help us face reality and in turn to help our communities and societies face reality. As cognitive psychologist Steven Pinker says, we children of the Enlightenment embrace the radical creed of universal realism. We believe in reality on its own terms. Although we don't claim to fully know reality or grasp ultimate truth, we still believe in it, and we believe empirical evidence and sound reasoning can help us increasingly understand reality and truth better than anything else. As frightening as it can be, we believe in reality, and so we are ready and eager to cope with it, no matter how much the truth may hurt. That's liberalism. As for public education, in addition to teaching kids what they need to know to function in today's changing world, including learning how to use AI and other technologies, we must consider teaching them how to think, how to reason, and how to rationally filter through the monsoon of information at their disposal. The primary purpose of education. Education ought to be about teaching them to become lifelong teachers of themselves by drawing out their own native curiosity, courage, civility, and powers of reason. That's where the healing in our society must begin, with the next generation, reducing their anxiety and their rational fears by giving them the tools to cope with the real world, not to cloister into an echo chamber. But there is also hope for this generation if we can promote these same coping strategies. Respect for the worth and dignity of others by respecting their freedom to speak for themselves and to freely participate in society's benefits without prejudice or persecution. Respecting their ability to reason and think for themselves without interference from any authority. And respect for their individuality by tolerating the many differences in our pluralistic societies. These are the principles that make us feel secure in an uncertain world, and that make others feel secure around us. And these are our principles. They are the principles that bring us calm in the eye of the storm of information flying wildly around us, so that we can courageously face it all and rationally consider it, and in this way become the well-informed people that our democracies require in order to function. Wherever the people are well-informed, they can be trusted with their own government. That whenever things get so far wrong as to attract their notice, they may be relied on to set them to rights. May it be so.
Please stand. I'm going to sing number 299 in the Gray Hymnal, Make Channels for the Streams of Love. Make channels for the streams of love where they may broadly run, and love has overflowing streams to fill them, everyone. But if at any time we cease such channels to provide, the very founts of love for us will soon be parched and dried. For we must share if we would keep this gift all else above. We cease to give, we cease to have, such is the law of love.
The closing words today are from someone with whom we are likely all familiar. I believe we are all one family and need each other in times of grief and gladness. And I believe in the power of human ingenuity and the people of goodwill to make a difference in the world. This is my credo as a Unitarian Universalist. It is what Superman and I have in common. Christopher Reeve, Unitarian Universalist. Amen, blessed be, salam alaikum, and shalom.